Begin today the Gemara on Daf Tzadikei Amud Beis, 7 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. It says Abaye Savarlah. So the Gemara here is discussing the halacha of Ba'ala Vimai. When you borrow something and the owner is with you and it breaks or it dies, you're not responsible. As it says in the pasuk that Ba'ala Vimai, so then Lo Yishalem. So here the Gemara is going to discuss the psukim about this, and here in this Gemara they have the psukim on the side. It's important to see what it says in the psukim to understand what the Gemara says. In the first pasuk it says, "V'chiyishal ishmeim re'eyu v'nishbarei meis." You borrowed it, and then it broke or died. So ba'alav einimai shalom yishalom. If the owner is not with you, then you have to pay for what happened. Then the next pasuk says, "In ba'alav imai," if the owner is with you, lo yishalom. You don't pay. Now, when the pasuk talks about this, it mentions two things: the time that you borrowed, and also the time when the oinus happened, that it broke or died. So how do we understand this? Are you only potter if the owner is with you throughout that entire time? Or are you going to be potter even if the owner was not with you the entire time, he was only there part of the time? So the point that the Gemara is going to get to over here is that the significant time is when the borrowing began. If at the time when you began, when you borrowed it, the owner was borrowed with the animal that you borrowed, then you're going to be potter. Whether he was with you later or not, that doesn't matter. That's the nekuda that the Gemara is going to come to over here. Okay, but now, how to darshan this? The Gemara over here is going to explain this based on something that we learned before here in the Gemara, that there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yoshia. When the pasuk says two things together, does that mean that the pasuk is saying that you have to have both? Or when the pasuk says two things together, does it mean either or? Even though it doesn't say the word oi, which means or, but it means either or. So over here as well, the pasuk says v'chiyishal ishmeim re'eyu, and it says v'nishbarei meis, and it broke and died. So do we read it together that you need both the borrowing and the time period when it broke or died? You read it together, or you read it as either or. And according to both of these perushim, both of these opinions, the Gemara will explain this pasuk. Okay, let's see inside. Talk to Gemara. Abaye savala Rabbi Yoshia. Abaye holds like Rabbi Yoshia's opinion. Rabbi Yoshia says when the Torah says two things together, it's read that it means both together. The example where Rabbi Yoshia says this is Ishki Yikalel Es Aviv Es Imai. So over there, when it says the father and the mother, you read it as both, the father and the mother together, not one or the other. So over here as well, you have to read the pasuk that it means both together. And Abaye will explain our pasuk as well according to Rabbi Yoshia. And therefore he will answer the contradiction that the Gemara will point out here in the pasuk according to Rabbi Yoshia's opinion. Rava holds like Rabbi Yonasan when the Torah writes two things together, even without writing the word oi, or it means either or. So he explains our pasuk here that way as well. And he will answer the contradiction that the Gemara will point out here in the psukim according to Rabbi Yonasan's opinion. So the Gemara spells this out. Abaye savala Rabbi Yoshia, Abaye holds like Rabbi Yoshia, Mataras like Rabbi Yoshia, and he explains the pasuk according to Rabbi Yoshia. So the beginning of the pasuk it says, "V'chiyishal ishmeim re'eyu," you borrow, v'nishbarei meis, and a broker died. So the pasuk writes borrowing and then also v'nishbarei meis. Is this read together or separately? According to Rabbi Yoshia, it's read together. And then the pasuk concludes, "Ba'alav ein imai shalom yishalom." If the owner was not with you, you have to pay. So what is understood from this pasuk if you read it together? Taime the lesser betarvayu. What the pasuk is saying is, if the owner was not with you in both time periods, when the borrowing began and when the animal died, then I say that you're going to be chayiv. But from that I can understand if the owner was with you even just by one of those times, whether when the borrowing began or at the time when the animal died. So so he was there with you by one of the times and he wasn't there by the other, potter. So then you should be potter. That's enough that the owner was with you to pater you. But on the other hand, here comes a contradiction though from the other pasuk. Because Hoksiv, in the next pasuk it says, Im ba'alav imai, that if the owner is with you, lo yishalem, then you don't pay. So over here, if you go back to what it says in the pasuk, so then you should be medayik as follows. Time the ise betarvayu. If it says when the owner is with you, you don't pay. And it goes back to what it said before in the pasuk. And according to Rabbi Yoshia, you read it together, both time periods together. So that means only if the owner was with you from the time of the borrowing and also at the time when the animal died, then you would be potter. But if the owner was with you just by one of those times and not by the other, you should be chayiv. So now we basically have a contradiction of these two psukim. What is the halacha? Does the owner have to be with you the entire time that you should be potter from paying? Or no, as long as he was with you by one of the time periods, you'd be potter. So how do we answer this? So from these two psukim, in order that it shouldn't be a contradiction, what it's coming to tell you is, if the owner is with you at the time when you borrowed, so then that's enough. That patters you. The owner does not have to be with you when it broke or died, so that you should be potter. On the other hand, the fact that we see from the pasuk that only if the owner is with you at both times, then you potter, it's because because if the owner was only with you in the time when it broke or died, then you wouldn't be potter. He has to additionally be with you before at the time when the borrowing began. That's how you understand this pasuk here. Now the Gemara is soon going to explain, if I have to choose one time to say that that's the significant time, that if the owner is with you, you become potter, why are we choosing the time when the borrowing began? Maybe we should choose the time when it actually broke or died. So that the Gemara is going to say, there's a svara to say that if we have to choose a time, we choose the time when the borrowing began, as we'll see. The Gemara continues on Daf Tzadik Vav. Rava Savalak Rab Yonasan. Rava holds like Rab Yonasan, when you read a pasuk and it says two things together, it's as if it says either or. Just like by Ishki Kalas Ava Vesimai, it's like it says either the father or the mother. Here as well, when it says that you borrowed, Yishal, and then it says V'nishba Oimeis, it means either or. So therefore, over here as well, he points out the contradiction in the pasuk, and he'll answer the same way, like the Gemara just explained. So he explains the pasuk according to Rabbi Yonasan. You take out the word over here, the Tanya. So what's the contradiction in the pasuk? It says in Ba'alav Imai, if the owner was with you, lo yishalem, you don't pay. What does this mean? Mashma de ise betarvaya. According to Rabbi Yonasan, that could mean either that the owner was with you both when the borrowing began and when it died. But it's also mashma that if he was with you just one of those time periods, that you would also be potter. Because again, this is following Rabbi Yonasan's opinion that says that it's as if it says in the pasuk either or. So here the pasuk saying, if he was with you in one of those time periods, you would be potter. But then in the other pasuk it says, Ba'alav einimai, shalom yishalom. If the owner is not with you, so then you pay. So again over here, what do we see in this pasuk? Mashma de lesse betavayu. You could say either it means that the owner was not with you at all, or mashma nami de chiise bechade velesse bechade. But it's also mashma that if the owner is with you in one of those times and he's not with you in another time, chayiv, you would be chayiv. So again over here, according to the way Rabbi Yonasan understands these psukim, you have a contradiction. If the owner is with you at only one of these times, would you be chayiv or pater? And the answer is the same as the Gemara said before. These two psukim come to teach you, if the owner is with you when the borrowing began, so then you potter, because he doesn't have to be with you also when it broke or died. But if the owner was with you only at the time when it broke or died, you're not going to be potter. He additionally has to be with you at the time when the borrowing began. So the point there is that this whole halacha of sheila b'bailam, that you potter, when's the significant time period? When the borrowing began, not when the actual breakage or the dying of the animal happened. So here now the Gemara addresses, why are we resolving this stira this way, to say that the significant time is when the borrowing began. In fact, the Gemara, maybe I should say the opposite is true, that the significant time is that the owner should be with you when it actually died. Answers the Gemara, it's logical that the main time is when you borrowed. That's the time when you're bringing the animal into your possession. So this is when it all begins. So therefore, if the Torah says, Baal Avima, you shouldn't pay, it makes sense that that's the most significant time. So the Gemara asks, on the contrary, Shvuro Meisadifa, the time when it broke or the animal died, that's the more significant time. Shekein Chayev Bainsel, that's the time when the oinus is happening that you're responsible for. So if the Torah says that if the owner is with you, you potter, that seems to be the more significant time that you should be potter. That's when the actual Chiyuv happens. So the Gemara says, no, because if not for the fact that you borrowed it, that you brought it into your possession, borrowing it, Shvura Meisamayavet, the fact that a broker died is nothing. So the more significant time is when the borrowing begins. The Gemara asks back, but v'lav shvuro mesa, but if not for the fact that it breaks or dies, she'ela mai ovid. The fact that you borrowed it is insignificant. The chiyuv comes from the fact that it broke or died. So the Gemara concludes, afila hachi, nevertheless, she'ela adifa, the time when you borrow, that is the more significant time when your obligation towards the owner begins, shekin chayev b'mzenisel. Because besides the point that we said before, that that's when you bring it into your possession, your obligation to reimburse the master starts already then, because it's from that time that you have to feed the animal, take care of the animal. So even if the actual chiyuv for the einus is only later, but at the time when the borrowing begins is when you bring it into your possession, and already there's a chiyuv right there to take care of the animal. So therefore, if the owner is with you at that time, that's a significant time that you would be pater because of Ba'al Avimai. Rav Ashi says that no, we don't need the svara here. There's actually the lashon of the pasuk in the beginning that you could see that it refers to the time when you borrowed. Because Amakra, when the pasuk talks here about the borrowing, it says v'chiyishal ish me'imreyeyu. If a person borrows from his friend. Now the two words me'imreyeyu are extra. It's understood. You're borrowing from your friend. What is it coming to say? V'loi, because it's coming to say like this: you borrowed from your friend. V'loi re'eyu imay. Not that you borrowed along with your friend, that he's borrowing himself to you together with his animal. And then shalom yishalom. That's when you have to pay if a einus happens. Ha re'eyu imay. But if your friend is with you when you're borrowing, pater, then you'll be pater. So that's the source. So if that's the case, we see that this is at the time of the borrowing, because the pasuk here says v'chiyishal. It's going at the time when the borrowing begins, that if you borrow the animal and not your friend himself, then you're chayev. But if you borrow the animal with the services, with your friend itself, then you're going to be pater. That's the source. So the Gemara asks on this, if you have a clear diuk here in the pasuk, that if your friend borrows himself to you together with the animal, you're pater. So then the psukim later are totally extra. When the Torah says that if the owner is not with you, you pay. V'im ba'al avimai, and if the owner is with you, the pasuk says that you don't pay. Lamali, why do I need the continuation of all these psukim? Answers the Gemara, no, the drasha of v'chiyishal ish mimreyeyu is not just such a clear drasha. Ilav hanoch, if not for the fact that the Torah clearly spells it out, that if the owner is with you, you're going to be pater, and if he's not, you're chayiv. Hava mineh, I would think to say, hi, urche dekrahu. The fact that the Torah uses the words me'im re'eyu are not extra, it's just customary for the pasuk to give this type of description. But now that the Torah wrote clearly that you pater, if the owner is with you, we could use the extra words of me'imreyeyu to be megala. What is the significant time period that the owner should be with you for you to be pater? And we learn from it that it's the v'chiyishal, the time when you borrow, not later on when the einus actually happened.
What's the possible shot of
the what?
What's the possible shot of that he's there when you're taking it?
Yeah. That he's lending himself. He's lending himself to you together, or he's giving his services, or you're hiring him together with the animal. That's what it means. Then you're going to be pater. If you're borrowing the animal itself, you're chayev. But if you're borrowing the animal together with the services of the owner, or you're hiring the owner to work with you, then you're going to be pater. Even if he wasn't with you later. Even if later on he went and does work on something else, but if b'shas ma'aseh he was borrowed together with it, you'll be pater.
So, and if that would that also mean if you borrow him later on?
No, that's too late. It has to be right. It has to be beginning. B'shas shayla. That's the Gemara's conclusion here. Okay, here the Gemara is going to ask a bunch of different tibayas regarding the obligation of a person, his responsibility when he borrows an animal. Boy, Rami Bacham asks the shaila, Shala l'rava mahu. If a person borrows an animal, for what purpose? He wants to have a relation himself, physically, with the animal. That's the purpose here. Is he going to be responsible for any einus that happens? Why should there be any shaila about this? Is the Torah obligating you to pay for any einus that happens when you borrow it for a purpose that people usually borrow it for, to work in the field and so on? For such a kind of use, people do not borrow this. Obviously, it's a huge isser, but it's not just, it's something which is unusual, so it's not included in the obligation of the Torah. So therefore, you should be pater completely for anything that happens to it. Or, no, the significant thing here is, why does the Torah say that when you borrow something, you're responsible for anything that happens? Mishumano. It's because when you take something from another person and you're deriving all the benefit for yourself, you're not paying for this and so on, So that's why you're so responsible on such a high level. And v'hainami ha'isle'ana. So this person that's borrowing, even if he's using it different than what people usually use it for, but if he has a benefit for himself, so then he becomes responsible for anything that happens with it. Another shaila, shala le'roizba. If a person borrows an animal, he's not going to use the animal at all. He just wants to be seen with this nice, big, expensive animal so that people should think that he has money and people will lend him money and so on. So now, what's the halacha? Memayne ba'inan v'ha'ike. Is the source of the obligation that you have to pay is because there's a certain transfer of a value of money that you're borrowing from your friend, and you're here as well, v'ha'ike, you have this animal in your possession, so you become responsible for anything that happens with it. The reason why you're obligated to pay if anything happens to it is because of the benefit that you have, the use in the animal itself. Here, even though you have a certain benefit that people see you around with this animal, but you're not actually using the animal itself, so you'd be potter. Another shaila, you borrow the animal and you're going to have a use out of the animal of something that's a value of less than a pruta. What's the halacha? You're going to be responsible for ninas. Do I say that if you're getting some value of money from your friend, you're responsible, and therefore you have that here as well, even though it's a mashu, it's less than a pruta, but nevertheless it's defined as memayne, so you're responsible. If the value that you're using from the animal is less than a pruta, then that's nothing. You're not responsible then for a ninas that happened. Now, based on this previous iboye, if we're going to say that less than a pruta is not enough of a value that you would be responsible for, so if so, shaila becomes sho'al shtei parais lasis behem pruta. You borrowed 2 cows, and you're going to work with the 2 cows the value of a pruta. But the work that's being done for each cow separately is just a half a pruta. So now, are you going to be responsible in this case? Do we look at the people here, the borrower, the lender, and therefore the use of the animal is going to, or the 2 animals that is going to be a pruta, so you're responsible. Look at the actual cows that you borrowed. Each cow you're using just for the value of a half a pruta, so you're going to be potter for that. Another shayla, shal mishutfin, a person borrows.
Where is it based on? It has to be a puta or less a puta?
Because, well, the Gemara is saying maybe when the Torah says that you have anah, has to be a real anah. That's not less than a pruta. It's not significant enough. Okay, till here the Gemara was asking Ibayis, when you get to your responsibility to pay. Now the continuation of the Gemara, it's going to ask the Ibayah regarding this that we learned before, that if it's bebailim, if the owner is with you, you're going to be potter. So now, if you borrow an animal from partners, and only one of those owners of the cow lends himself to you his services to work with this cow. So what's the halacha here? Do I say kuloi ba'olav be'inon in order to pat you, because ba'olav imay, the owner is with you when you borrow the cow? Do I say you have to have the entire owner, which means in this case both partners? And v'holek over here only one partner is giving his services to you together with the cow. So therefore you're going to be chayiv. Oidilme mehahu palge didei miftar. From that half that you did work with for that partner, for what you have to pay him for what happened, you would be potter. For what you have to pay the other partner that was not with you, that you're going to be chayiv. So we're going to split over here for one chayiv and for one potter. A similar shaila in the reverse, shutfin sheshalu. What's if partners are borrowing a cow? V'nishal le'echad mehen. And the owner is also being borrowed, but only to one of these partners, not to the other one. Mahu, what's going to be the halacha here? Do I say kulei shayel be'inon, that you have to have the entire borrower that should have the owner that's working for him? So over here in this case, one of the partners is doing work with this cow, and the owner was not borrowed to him to work with the cow. He was only borrowed to the other one. So for me, there's no Baal Avimai. So if the Baal Avimai is not full for the entire shoyel, so then the whole pitur of Baal Avimai doesn't apply at all. Or we could say, no, by he palge de shaili mias mifter. Since for one of the partners that borrowed this cow, the owner did lend himself together for him, for the work that he's doing. So over there for that, you would be potter. Even if for the other partner, he would be chayiv because the owner did not lend himself for the services for the other partner. Another shaila, shoal mea isha, a person borrows from a woman. So what we're talking about over here, as Rashi says, nichse melug. The nichse melug are the properties or the objects of a woman that she brings into the marriage. What's the halacha with all those things? For here we're talking, for example, about an animal. So this animal, the animal itself belongs to her, but the usage of it, which is the paytis of it, that belongs to the husband. So a person borrowed from a woman this cow, which is nichse melug, and she did not lend herself together with the animal, but instead v'nishal baila. It's imay. The Bach probably adds over here 1 second. Ima, yeah. The husband lent his services together with the animal to the person that's borrowing. Okay, so over here, what does the husband own in this animal? He only owns the usage of it, but not the actual animal itself. Or another case, isha shashala. A wife, a woman, so she is borrowing someone's animal to do work in her property. And here we're talking specifically that she borrowed to do work in her property of nichse melug. So again, this is a property where the actual property itself belongs to her, but the paytis, the usage of the property, belongs to the husband. V'nishal lebal. Now the owner of this cow that she borrowed did lend his services to her as well to work for her. But he did not lend himself for her. He lended himself to the husband. Now, what does the husband have? The husband only has right to the fruits of the property, but not to the actual property itself. So now, what's going to be the halacha in both of these cases? So the Gemara explains that in both of these cases here, the basis of the shaila is 1 point. Do I say kinyan peiris kinyan aguftami, that the acquisition, the rights that the husband has for the fruits, for the usage of the animal of his wife, or from the property of his wife, so that's significant enough that it's considered to be like he has an acquisition in the body of the property itself, or like in the animal itself. And therefore, in both of these cases, I say that it's going to be sheila b'bailam, that it's going to be significant enough to pater from paying. Or I say that the husband only has the rights to the paytis, to the usage, and therefore the rights that he has in her animal, or the rights that he has in the property, is just for paytis, and therefore he has no connection to the actual body of the property itself, and therefore you're going to be chayiv in this case. Another shaila, this is the last shaila the Gemara here asks about the subject. Ravina asks Ravashi, a person says to a shliach of his, say v'hashali imparasi. Go, I'm going to lend out my cow to someone, and I want you as my shliach to go and work together with that person with this cow. So what's the halacha in such a case? Ba'olav mamish be'ina. This halacha the Torah says that if the owner is lending himself out together with the cow that you potter, does that mean only the owner himself? So v'leke, in this case, the owner himself is not working together with the cow. Or we say that because the owner is appointing someone to be in his place to go to work together with the cow that he's lending, so it's ve'ike. So therefore, we say that it's like the owner himself is here together with the cow, and therefore you should be potter. So regarding the last two ibayas that we asked there, the ibaya regarding a husband and a wife, and the last ibaya here regarding a shliach. So he says, Baal, the question regarding a husband, what is the status of a husband's acquisition that he has in his wife's properties? So he only has the rights to the usage of it, the paytis of it. Is that significant enough to be like he has an acquisition in the body of the thing itself or not? So that point, plukte de Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish. That's an argument between Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish, as the Gemara will soon bring. Shliach, the shayla that we had about a shliach, is he considered to be like the owner himself regarding this din of Bala Vimai? Plukte de Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshia. That, as the Gemara will bring, is an argument between Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshia. What's the source here? So Baal plukte de Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish, because the Itma we learned the following machlokes between them. A person sells a property in Eretz Yisrael to his friend, but it's not a full sale. He's selling to his friend, let's say for 2-3 years, the rights of the paytis that grow on the trees in this property are all yours. So he sold him only the paytis, but not the actual property itself. So now the shaila is regarding the mitzvah of bikurim, whether this person can fulfill the mitzvah of bikurim properly. Rabbi Yechanan says, maybe you can bring the bikurim of the fruits that grow on this property, and the kaira. I can also read what it says in the psukim, as Rashi here brings. It says in the pasuk there, Hine yaivesi es reishis priya adoma shenasatoli. I'm bringing the fruits that you gave me. He could say that it's totally mine, even though he doesn't even own the property itself. He only owns the fruits of it, but owning the fruits is like you own the property itself. It's significant enough that you can say Nasatali. Shlokish Amar, Shlokish says, maybe you bring, but you can't read those psukim. As the Gemara explains, Rabbi Yechanan, maybe the ownership, the rights that you have to the fruits is significant enough, like you own a portion of the property itself, so you could say it's mine. But Shlokish Amar, maybe that you bring the bikurim, but you can't be the mitzvah fully. You can't read the psukim because kinyan peiris lav kinyan aguf dami. Your acquisition in the peiris is not equivalent like the right or the acquisition in the body of the property itself. Nasatali, no, because the lashon of the pasuk that it says Nasatali, that they able to get reish priya domash Nasatali, it's mashma that you have to have an ownership in the property itself. So the Gemara is applying.
He's asking, Sattva could go on the fruits.
No, that's how the Gemara teaches. Okay, so the Gemara is applying the same achloikis when you get to the case over here when you have a husband and a wife, and the husband has the rights only to the peiros of his the property of his wife, whether the behemah, whether the property. Here we see this machlokes how far the rights of the husband goes. Is it considered to be like he has an ownership in the guf itself? Now the second point, shliach, the case regarding when a person sent a shliach to go to be with the animal, to work with the animal that he's been lending someone, plukta the Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshia. That's an argument between Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshia. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, ha'ime la'apetrupis, a person says to a person that's the manager of his properties and his possessions, so this is a person that is going overseas, and he appoints a caretaker, a manager to feed the kids in the family, his wife, and take care of everything. Now he says also to this caretaker, any vows that my wife will make, from today until when I come back from wherever I go, I appoint you to nullify all her vows. As we learned in Masechta Nedarim, the husband has the right to nullify any of the vows that a woman makes on the day that she made it, on the day he hears about it. So he's appointing her a shliach to nullify her vows. And he nullified the vows for her. I would think that would work, that the vows will be nullified by this shliach. So Talmud Laima, we learn from the pasuk, it says, Isha yikimenu v'isha yifirenu, that only her husband can nullify the vows, and only the husband can confirm the vows. You can't appoint a shliach for this. Divrei Rabbi Yeshia, that's Rabbi Yeshia's opinion. Rabbi Yonasan says, no, we do not learn out from this pasuk of Isha yikimenu v'isha yifirenu. Metzinu b'chol makom, we find always in Torah, sheshluchai shaladam kamaisai, that a shliach takes the place of the mashaleach. Here, the apotropis is in the place of the husband to nullify her vows. So the Gemara applies the same thing over here in our case regarding Ba'al Avimai. Tosfos explains the reason the Gemara is comparing it to that case is because just like there, you have the pasuk of Isha Yifirenu, Isha Yikimenu, and they're arguing whether you darshan that or not. Here as well, when it says twice, Ba'al Avimai, Ba'al Avimai. So the question is, do I darshan to say that it's only literally the owner himself that has to be lending himself together with the cow, or it could even be Shluchish Laden Kamaisai. So it's the same achloikis that applies here as well. Amalei Rav Ilish asked Rav, Ha'oimela Avdoi, Tseva Hashalim Parasi. A person says to his slave, Evet Kanani, he says, you go and you be hired, you go work together with the cow that I'm lending this person. Mahu, what's the halacha in this case? Do I apply Ba'al Avimai that the person's slave is going to be in the place of the master himself? Now the Gemara explains, to buy lamandama shluchish ladam kamaisai. This is a question both if you say that when it's a shliach, that he does take the place of the owner and Ba'al Avimai applies regarding the shliach. We can still have a shaila though regarding the eved. And on the other hand, to buy lamandama shluchish ladam kamaisai. And it's also a shaila if you say that by the shliach he does not take the place of the owner, but by an eved possibly he does. And the Gemara explains, the reason we have a shaila if you say that a shliach does take the place of the owner himself, Hanimili, I could say, when is that the case? Only by a shliach. The bar mitzvahu. A shliach is a yid that's chayiv in mitzvahs, and therefore there's a din of shlichis, and therefore he can take the place of the mishalech. Shluchish ladim kamaisai. Aval eved alav bar mitzvahu, an eved that is not chayiv in mitzvahs like a yid, and therefore there's no din of shlichis regarding an eved. So maybe he, if he's being hired out or being lended out together with the cow, he does not take the place of the owner himself. Or maybe we could say the opposite. Even the opinion that says that a shliach does not take the place of the owner himself, maybe I could say hanimil shliach. That's only true regarding the shliach. There's a certain limitation in the lashon of the pasuk that I see that it doesn't go so far regarding this case of bala v'imay. Vol eved, but maybe when it comes to a person's slave that is going to be hired now together with this animal, maybe I should say yad eved ki yad rabbi damya, that the slave is literally considered to be a possession of the master, an extension of the master, that his hands is literally like the hand of the master, and therefore you're going to be potter if the slave was hired together with the animal. Amalei, so Rav answered, Mistavre yad eved ki yad rabbi damya. It's logical to say that an eved is just an extension of the master, and therefore if he's hired or he's borrowed together with the cow, you're going to be potter for this. Another shayla Rami Bachome asked, Baal b'nichsei ishtay. A person that the husband, regarding the possessions of his wife, he has the properties of his wife or any other movable, valuable possessions that she brings into the marriage. What is the status of a husband regarding all of those objects that he's using, the paytis from what his wife brings into the marriage, the nichsei melog? Shayel have is the status of the husband when he has the rights to use the paytis of this, that he's a borrower. And if he's a borrower, so then if it's then he's going to be responsible for any oinus that happens with it. Or perhaps he has the status of a seicher. He's like a renter. He's paying for this. The fact that he has the rights to use the paytis of his wife's properties, his wife's animals, he's paying something for this. Rashi brings later on here in the sugya, what does he pay for this? In exchange for this, he takes the responsibility that if his wife ever gets captured, he's going to redeem her. So therefore, it's not just for free that he has the rights to use the paytis of her properties. He's getting something in return, so maybe we should refer to him as a seicher. So if a oinus happens, it would be potter. So Rav says, now this Shiloh of Rami Bachome, Lufum Churfe Shabeshte. Because of his sharpness, so he thought this very quickly, but then he made a mistake here. What's the mistake? Because Manavshach, either way you look at it, whether you would say the husband has the status of being a borrower from his wife or a renter from his wife, so either way he's going to be potter. Because Isha Yalave, if you're going to say that he's borrowing, Shela B'Bailamhi, but he's borrowing together with the owner, which is his wife, getting her work for him, together with the fact that he borrows her animal. And the reason for this is because a wife has obligation for certain work that she does for the husband from the moment that the marriage begins. So the moment the marriage begins and he gets her cow to use from her, he's also getting her herself as a wife, which includes also certain things that she has to do for him. So it's bebailim. So either way, he would be potter for anything that happens to it. And if you're going to say that it's considered to be that he's like renting the objects or whatever valuables it is from his wife, so schir is bebailim he. So it's also a schiris that he's renting together with the owner, the wife, and therefore he should also be potter. As the halach is, b'bailim, it's whether it's a rental, whether it's a loan, either way you potter. So what's the ibaya here? Hello. So the Gemara tries to explain. Maybe we could say the ibaya is as follows. Ki kam ibaya leila Rami Bachome. When did Rami Bachome have a shaila? The agar mina pada, that he already rented this cow from her before he married her. So the rental, as we said before, when's a significant time period that you potter if the owner comes along with the cow that you borrow at the time when the rental or the borrowing begins. So over here the case is that he rented from her a cow before the marriage began. And then and now he gets married to her. So now what's the shaila? So here the shaila is, shayel have oy seicher have. Is the husband a borrower when he has the rights to use her cows or whatever it is, or he's just a renter? Now, why would that make a difference over here regarding this case? So the Gemara explains. Do I say shayel have that the husband, when he uses now, once he's married and is using his wife's cow, so now he becomes a borrower? So if so, basically the status of him using this cow changed. In the beginning, he was a renter. But now he got married to her, and now, forget about the rental. Now he has rights to use it because he's married to her. So therefore I say as follows. Va'asya shaila bebailim. So now the new status that began from the moment that he married her which is that he's now a borrower together with his wife that's working for him, because she has to also do things for him, and therefore mafka schiris shaloi bebailim. That uproots the previous status that he was a renter and then he rented without her services. And therefore now it's going to be shela bebailim and he's going to be potter for any inus that happens. Or maybe I should say, no, the rights that a husband has to use the wife of the animal, the animal of the wife, that's his rights are as a renter. And therefore, his original status as a renter remains. He was a renter before he married her, and now the fact that this is his wife and he has the rights to use her animals, he's still a renter. So maybe I should say that just like in the beginning, he was a renter without the owner being there with you in the beginning of the rental, even though now his wife became his wife and he has her services that she works for him, but the previous status as is remains. Why? Because the terms of the rental don't change. He's a renter before and he's a renter now. So we consider it to be one long rental where the beginning of the rental, she was not with him. But the Gemara does not accept this pshat that this is what Rami Bachome tried to ask either. And the Gemara explains, what difference should it make if the husband is a borrower or a renter from the moment he gets married? The Isha Yalave, you're telling me like this, that if you say that when he gets married, he's a borrower now, so then I say, the fact that now he's borrowing, and he borrowed together with his wife. And mafkas chiros shaloi bebailem, and that uproots the previous status that he rented from her this cow, and it was not with the woman at that point, together with the cow. So now that he got married though, and now that he becomes a borrower, so it's a new status, it's like a new beginning, and now from the time of the marriage, she was with him, and therefore he would be potter. So if so, but logically you should say the same thing, that even if when he gets married to her, his rights to use the cow is also only as a rental, but nevertheless, it's a new rental. You can't say it's one long rental, because the fact that now he's a renter, not because he rented it, it's because he has the rights from marriage. That's why it's a rental. So it's a whole new rental. So therefore, this rental now, which is together with his wife, that's working for him because she's his wife, it should uproot the previous status that he rented it without her together with the animal, but now it's a new rent. It's not the same. It's not a continuation. It's not the same rental. So therefore, there's no shaila regarding this case over here that it's going to be considered to be either a schiris b'bailim or a sheila b'bailim. So as Gemara pointed out before, either way, he would be potter for anything that happens with it. So Ella, the Gemara concludes, what was the case that Rami Bachome had a shaila? Kogain, the case over here is the agra ihi parame alma. She rented a car from somebody. It's not her cow. She rented its cow from someone. And then v'hoda nazba, and now she marries him. And what happens when she marries him? When she marries him, now the husband has the rights to use the paytas of anything that she has. So now this cow that she has as a rental, the husband has the rights to use it. And what are the rights that the husband has to use from this cow? He has the rights as a borrower. He's a shoyel. So now what happens here? This is basically a case where you have three individuals involved with this cow. You have the original owner, you have her that's a renter, and then you have the husband. Once she gets married to him, the husband is now a shoyel that's borrowing now the cow from her because his rights to use her cow is like a borrower. Now this is actually a case that we had earlier in Perek HaMafkid, where the Gemara discussed the situation where you have an owner, a renter from the owner, and then a borrower. So the question over here is, who's responsible to pay what? So if you remember, the Gemara said that there's a machlokes. The terms of a renter are less, he pays less than the terms of a borrower. A renter does not pay for an einus, a borrower does. So there's one opinion that Rabbanan say that, okay, here the Gemara brings, let's see first the words of the Gemara inside. According to the Rabbanan's opinion that say, Shoyel Mishalim L'Seicher. The shoyel has to pay to the seicher. He doesn't, and then the seicher is going to be totally potter. What this means is like this: the seicher, anytime you have an owner, a renter, and then a borrower from the renter, what happens is the renter, if an einus now happens to this animal, the renter does not have to pay to the owner for this einus because he's potter for an einus. The borrower, however, he's responsible for an einus. He's going to have to pay the renter for the einus that happened. That's according to the Rabbanan's opinion. So if that's the case, the Gemara says, Loi tibayalach. So over here in this case, there's no ibaya. Why? Because the vadai sheila bebaylim he. So the husband here, that's now the borrower of this cow from his wife, it's considered to be sheila bebaylim. Why? Because who is the responsibility of the owner to? Not the owner. I meant to say the husband, that is. The husband, which is the borrower here. Who is the husband responsible to pay to? Just to his wife. That's it. Now, he doesn't have any responsibility to the original owner. If his responsibility is just to his wife, so he's borrowing from his wife together with the services of his wife, because he's getting married to her. So she's going to be working for her husband together with this cow that he's borrowing from her. So if any inus happens and the responsibility of the husband is only to her, it's sheila b'bailam, and then it would be it's simple that it would be potter for anything that happens. Ki tibayalach. What was Rami Bachame's shaila? Aliba de Rabbi Yaisi. The shaila over here would be according to Rabbi Yaisi, because the Amar. What does Rabbi Yaisi say in such a kind of case where you have an owner, a renter from the owner, and then a borrower from this renter? So Rabbi Yaisi says, Tachzei para lebaylam marishainim. That over here, the responsibility of the husband in this case would be not to the wife, that's the renter. The responsibility of the husband goes back to the original owner. Just like in any case where you have a renter and then a borrower from the renter, what happens if an oinus happens? The renter is potter to pay because he doesn't have to pay for an oinus. But the borrower is responsible for the oinus. Who does he have to pay to? He doesn't pay to the renter. He has to pay to the original owner. So over here as well, the husband that's borrowing from his wife, which is the renter, the husband doesn't have responsibility to pay to his wife. He has to pay to the original owner that he borrowed from. So over here, if that's the case, over here, this is an example where you could say that the husband is using his wife's animal, and you can't argue and say that it's obvious that it's bebailim, that he's getting the services of his wife, because over here it's an example where he's using his wife's animal, but who's the owner of it? Not his wife. The owner is somebody else that the wife rented it from. So over here is where Rami Bachame's ibaya could apply. Shoyel have. Do I say that a husband has the status of a borrower and therefore he's obligated for an inus? And his obligation will be not to his wife. The obligation will be to pay to the original owner. Oh, he's seicher, or he's just a renter and therefore he's only responsible for a gneva and aveda, or maybe even like a shemechinam according to another opinion, but not for an inus that happens. So basically, the Gemara found a case where you see that the husband is using his wife's animal, and his obligation to pay is not to her. The obligation to pay is to someone else, and therefore you can still ask the shaila. It's relevant to ask the shaila whether the husband has the status of a borrower or a renter, and it's not bebailim. The services of his wife doesn't matter because he's not paying to his wife. He's paying to a different person that she rented it from, according to Rabbi Yaisi's opinion. It goes back to the original owner.
How did he become a seicha?
Who? How did who become a seicher? He got married to her. So when he gets married, this is the halacha of the nichse melog, that he could use his wife's properties, right? That's the nichse melog. He has the usage. No, it's not. That's the shaila. That's the shaila of Rami Bachome. The rights that a husband has to use his wife's properties or his wife's animal, is he defined as a borrower or is he defined as a renter? As I mentioned before, Rashi says that because in exchange the husband has to redeem his wife for this, that he's allowed to use her animals, maybe he's sort of paying for these rights to use, so he's just a renter. Or no, that the right that he has to redeem her, it does not turn him into a renter. He's borrowing, he's using it as a borrower, and therefore he's going to be he's going to be chayiv, that is an einsin. That's the shaila. So Amar Rava answers that neither are true. He's not a borrower. A husband that uses his wife's possessions is not a borrower or a renter either. Rather, the status of the husband is that he's a buyer. Where do we see this? We learned this out from what Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, in Usha, the Chachamim instituted, Ha'isha shamachra b'nichsei milug b'chaye baila, a wife that is, that sold her properties that the husband now could use, that are nichsei milug. So she sold it in the husband's lifetime, umeisa, and then she died. Habal maitzi miyad alakuchais. the husband has the right to go to the buyers and say that, sorry, I'm the husband, and even though my wife sold it to you while I was still alive, and at that time, seemingly, the body of the property itself still belongs to her, it doesn't matter. Chachamim instituted that the husband should have a prior right to say that I'm the buyer, and therefore, if my wife dies, just like if she would have not sold it, the husband inherits the wife. Even after she did sell it, the husband still inherits the wife. So we see over here that Chachamim gave a very strong acquisition of the husband and his wife's possessions, not just to use it, but he has a certain power as a buyer in it. That if someone else will buy it, the husband can come and say, I'm the first buyer. So therefore, he's going to be potter for any inus that happens. He's going to be potter for anything because he's basically like a buyer. Another Shaila the Gemara says, Rami Bachame asked, Baal b'nichsei ishtay. A husband regarding the possessions of his wife, mi ma'al. Is there going to be any issue that it would be ma'al, which is when you misuse something of hektish? What we're talking about over here is during the marriage, if there's some kind of object that his wife inherited from her father or from somewhere, and along with those possessions that she inherits, there's items of hektish that come into the husband's possession. And unbeknown to them, there's hektish here. So the question is, when he inherits this, is there going to be me'ilah? Now, at this point, the Gemara understands that we're asking that you should be moyel automatically. As soon as you get this, even without using it, even without doing anything with it, but the very fact that you got it, you should be moyel. So the Gemara right away clarifies that can't be. So Amar Rava says, man limal here. Who should be the one that should be moyel? That he's using hektish when he's not supposed to. Limuel Baal, are you going to say that the husband that got now this usage, this rights of usage from these objects of nichsim miluk, so the husband should be mayol, but why? He's only interested in acquiring something that's allowed for him, something that's hektish, if he doesn't know about it. He's not interested in being kind of this, so he's not using it, he's not interested in it. Why should it be mayol in this? Now, Timoil Ihi, should we say that she, the wife, she's the one that's bringing in these possessions, she's the one that should be mayil, she's bringing it into the husband's possession. She's not interested in, again, second Timoil Ihi, that Teiranami Loi Nichale Delikni. Second, here the gears on the side that says, takes out the word, the Teira. She only wants that the husband should use something which is allowed, not something which is not allowed. So you can't blame her for the fact that she's bringing into the husband's possession something that is not allowed, something which is hektish. Now, maybe you could argue and say, Bezdin, Nimalu Bezdin, that is, that the Bezdin, which is the Chachamim, the Bezdin that makes this takana, that the possessions of a wife belong now to the husband, so they're the ones that are causing that the husband gets the acquisition of this object of hektish that comes into this Yerusha here, so maybe they should be moyel. So the Gemara says, obviously that's not true, because ki avdu Rabbanan tekante, when Chachamim instituted v'amru, and they said, Baal lekeachave, that the husband acquires the possessions of the wife, leheteire. They only made this for something which is allowed. But if it's an object of hektish, obviously the takan of the chachamim that the husband acquires this does not apply. So there's no room to say that automatically somebody should be moyel just because the husband gets this object from the wife. He doesn't get it. So rather Rava says, Baal Ma'al, the husband will be moyel the kishayotzi. If he goes ahead and uses this, if he goes and uses it for any mundane use, then he's going to be moyel. Just like a person that takes any money or any valuable thing from hektish and uses it for chulin, so even if you don't know, that's b'sheigig, so that you're moyel, and then you have to pay the keren, the chaimish, and you have to bring a carbon. So the husband, if he actually uses it, then the husband will be moyel.